Justin Marshall with us, 81 Test veteran of the All Blacks, and covered the World Cup for Supersport South Africa. So it's going to be fascinating to get your perspective on especially the Arps and how they celebrated that win. But Justin, let's begin at the beginning. A week or more after the final, and that's given all of us a good chance just to sort of take a breath about it and kind of reflect on what we saw. Any regrets for you about the way the All Blacks played, about the TMO, about the referee, about the result?
No, I thought, once there's a red card situation, ultimately many people feel that the contest has gone out of the game. But I certainly felt that the All Blacks just showed great fortitude. They showed real heart, and they never stopped trying. And to a degree, they actually had more possession and more ball, which goes to show that they're extremely fit. They backed themselves, and I certainly thought that, given that they were down a man for the majority of the game, they could have all but won it. So you have to be incredibly impressed and incredibly proud as a New Zealander about the way that they, tackled adversity and a difficult situation and didn't bow their heads down. They puffed their chests out and got stuck in. Look, obviously there's always going to be a lot of debate about certain decisions in a game and fallout, but there was always going to be drama in that game. I never ever thought it was going to be anything bar a close contest, and it was going to come down to a couple of significant moments, and ultimately that's what happened, because the top four teams in the world, and New Zealand, South Africa were two of them. Then you include Wales and France and Ireland, were basically inseparable, and all of the results and all of the games when those teams played each other pretty much justified that. So. Yeah, tough tournament to win, and the All Blacks just very nearly got there.
TMO and referee Wayne Barnes has retired. I don't kind of have any lingering bitterness towards him. I thought some of the decisions were a bit confusing in the game. But the overall use of the TMO, and I don't know whether you've heard what Steve Hansen said. He said, look, we're watching it in replay. Yeah, which is, I totally agree with him. Look, the refs have got to look at it in real time. We're watching it in real time as spectators. You guys, when you were playing, you're playing it in real time. Is the TMO just involved way too much at the moment?
Yes, absolutely. And what they're actually looking for is they're looking to try and find something everywhere in all components of the game. They're looking to try and find an offside. They're looking to try and find a slightly untidy neck roll, high contact, a knock on. Those little parts of the game where those things can happen, and they're just part of the game where we used to accept that. But, nowadays, I guess TV plays a role in it as well. When something goes wrong, if the TV coverage goes and shows a replay from 6 phases ago where there was a knock on, well, if the game doesn't cover it, then that snowballs the problem, doesn't it? So we're all out of sync at the moment of looking too hard, trying too hard, and really disrupting the flow of the game. And unfortunately, it's not only our sport it's happening in, because of technology and the way technology is going. Like, all games are suffering. Like the game I went to last night, because of the injection of the TMO, I think it's the VAR, they call it over. The first half went for an extra 12 minutes, and the second half for 9 minutes longer. This is just it's a common thread amongst all sport now that technology is dictating the game, and we're always having to look at everything to make sure possibly something illegal hasn't happened.
What's the answer to it, mate? Is it that people just have to actually decide that what do we actually want? Do we want a flowing game? Do you want every single nitpicking thing pulled up? Because, most of the time the TMO actually technically gets it right, but the frustrating thing, as you saw last night with the VAR as well, is it stops the game. It's kind of like the whole balloon gets pricked. We score a try now and we don't, do we celebrate? No, we don't. We score a goal. Oh, hang on a second, we've got to wait for the VAR. I don't like watching sport like that.
No, neither do I. And I certainly feel we've got to try and protect the referees and give them more control. And they'll be able to do that as long as whenever they slightly miss something, if they don't refer it or don't get referred to by the TMO for 4 phases back where there was a slight knock on, but the referee thought it came off a foot, we'll never get anywhere. And I think probably the way to go about it is to cut back. If it's not in the motion of scoring a try or the last phase before a try, and everyone knows that, well, you just have to put up with the odd shit call every now and then.
Yep.
But,
always have.
If it's in the motion of scoring or in the last ruck before, then they are able to go back and look at it. If not, then that's life. And I think if both teams, all supporters know that that's the case, and it's like, oh well, yep, there was one there, but sometimes you win some, sometimes you don't. Then I think that'll take all of the I guess interference out of it, of toing and froing between TMOs and referees. And just to add, I thought was bloody disgraceful the fallout and the abuse that Wayne Barnes suffered. I think our game has got a better reputation than that, and the referees are out there doing their very best. I thought the treatment of Ben O'Keefe by the French crowd was disgraceful as well. I thought he controlled his games that he refereed, quarterfinals, semi-finals, really well, but they didn't treat him very nicely at all. And I think we've got to grow up a bit and protect the referees. And ultimately, Wayne Barnes didn't give Sam Cane a red card. He referred it and let the technology do its job, but yet people took it out on him, and I think that's a real shame.
Justin Marshall is with us. We're wrapping up the whole of the Rugby World Cup, and you had a really unique perspective too, because you were, as I said earlier, calling it for Super Sport, so you're surrounded by South Africans. Justin, did it mean more to them? And I say that on the back of Sia Khaleesi's comments afterwards, which I just have really resonated with me, where he said, we did this for our whole country, the whole of South Africa. You've got to understand South Africa and come to South Africa to know what it actually means. And I'm not so sure at the moment in New Zealand, with the divisive society that we seem to be living in, that somebody could stand up from the All Blacks, say that, and it means as much. It's no criticism, but do you see where I'm going with this? I just think that, I don't know, that's why I'm asking you, did it mean more to them? Was it somehow better for them as a country to win it?
Oh, look, I think, the argument is it's better for them as a country, but their country is in a lot different state than New Zealand. Politically, there's unrest there. There are economic problems. They are unhealthy at the moment as a country, and there's a lot of issues there. And sport unites people, particularly rugby in South Africa. And if you just look at the parades and see the outpouring of people of sort of admiration and love for the Springboks and what they've achieved, I think it's probably really helped the country. It's galvanised them a bit where there's a lot of diversity. So look, the argument there, I think, is fair, and New Zealand probably don't need it as much. Many will argue differently, but that's my perspective. But I certainly feel that they certainly didn't need it in terms of a World Cup and getting 4 over our 3. I think, we did enough, and ultimately, if it was coming back to New Zealand, I would have felt for South Africa because the country would be better off. But ultimately, our country could do with some really good rugby goodwill. To win a Rugby World Cup and bring it back home after what happened in 2019, I think we would have prospered as well. So, I certainly feel that I wouldn't be complaining or feeling sorry for South Africa if it did come to New Zealand, because by hell I would have loved that, and I'm sure every rugby-loving person and general public would have loved it in New Zealand as well.
How should Ian Foster and Sam Cane be remembered? Because let's remember, we were 1 point away from winning that, and this was an All Black side that went overseas where a lot of us, me included, I got to be honest, I didn't think we'd get past the quarterfinal. We've had very inconsistent All Black-like results, as all of us have brought up over the last few years, not been able to string 2, 3, 5, 6 games together in a row, losing records at home, losing in a pool match at a World Cup, all of that kind of stuff. Yet, one miserable bloody point away, and what, a Richard Mwanga conversion or a Geordie Barrett penalty, could have won us that World Cup. And these guys would be remembered completely differently. Ian Foster would be Sir Ian Foster. Sam Cane would be a winning All Black captain. So how do you remember them, and how do you want them to be remembered?
Well, I think they're a team that's been trying to find a way to win a World Cup final for a couple of years under Ian Foster. Obviously, that's given the enforcement that he got from the New Zealand Rugby Union when his job was on the line. And since 2019, you're absolutely right. The consistency has not been there, and we have seen our history dented by this side, and by this coaching group. We've lost to Ireland in a home series and a test against Ireland for the first time. We've lost to Argentina on our own patch for the first time, including losing to them in Australia for the first time ever. So those things dent our history. A world record loss to South Africa. So they have an effect, and people remember that. But equally, this side has achieved, significantly, Bledisloe Cup wins. They've won the Rugby Championship. So in amongst that, they've done some brilliant things as well. So yeah, it's been a bit roller coaster, probably a bit too much than what people would be used to, and which would you usually accept as an All Black, and we are harsh on our All Blacks. But I guess there's that argument that the rest of the world have caught us up, and they've got to the point now where it's not mandatory that you win 13 of your 14 tests a year, and maybe we just have to accept that what we're actually getting now is real contests where the All Blacks are actually having to front up every week, and there's no real guarantees that they're going to win, and that's got to be exciting for the spectators, doesn't it? Albeit, like I said, it will ultimately affect our history. So, yeah, I think they'll be remembered as a very good side that had an excellent Rugby World Cup, and they proved a lot of critics wrong, me included, and good on them. And I think they can hold their heads very high for what they achieved in a really difficult tournament. And like you say, a goal kick or a decision maybe not to kick for touch when points were on, whatever, just the odd little thing that didn't quite flow in that game, they would be remembered completely differently. But I still think they'll be remembered fondly, and we should be proud of what they did at that World Cup.
Couple more questions, we'll let you go. Thank you so much for your time wrapping this up. I could listen to you all day talking about this. Razor next year and what's he got to work with, and especially looking at your position 9 and 10, because we got a brand new combination now at the base of the scrum, so crucial to any side, especially an All Black side. When you lose Aaron Smith and you lose Richie Mwanga, and those guys looked as though at the World Cup, Justin, they could have gone on for at least another 2 or 3 seasons each. So what has Razor got left now with all of the players leaving, and also what do you expect him to do? Is it going to be a brand new All Black side or not?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Marty, and I think it's a valid one too. And it's going to be interesting off the back of what I just said about, Ian Foster and his reign as All Black coach and the players that he had under them. And yes, many of them will be missing. It'll be really, to me, interesting to see how much rope the New Zealand Rugby public give Scott Robertson, given that he's going to have quite a different looking side to work with. He's still going to have some of the key players that that have been a part of Ian Foster's side for a while. Your Geordie Barretts, Rico Ioanes, player front rowers, Cody Taylor. There's still a good nucleus of them there.
Loose
Scott
forwards,
Barrett,
yeah.
But yeah, equally, like you said, the halves will be completely different. Will there be a change? There could possibly be a change at fullback. It might take a little bit of time, and he's not going to have a great amount of time. You hit June, and then it's into obviously the Rugby Championship, and that's going to be a really interesting Rugby Championship to see where Australia are at as well, because they're in all sorts of turmoil. I don't feel we're in that position. I feel we're really a really good position of depth. And the one thing about Scott Robertson is he does his homework and he does his due diligence, and he would have been already thinking about what type of game he now wants the All Blacks to, under his reign and under his campaign and his guidance, what sort of game plan, what sort of style is he going to play, and is he going to, get the All Blacks back to that number one place in the world, and who are the players, if so, that'll fit into that plan. That's the fascinating thing.
At some stage, and is it going to happen in the near future, do we need to start relaxing these overseas playing laws? Maybe put in a caveat that you've got to play 50 tests for your country, and then you can be selected from overseas in another league, or you've got to play X amount of Super Rugby games. It's working for South Africa. They've won 2 World Cups now back-to-back, Justin, and they've got players playing all over the world. Can we continue with the policy that we have that you've got to stay in New Zealand? Is that sustainable?
I think it's sustainable because of our player depth. And you only have to look at Super Rugby and how successful our super teams are. I do feel that we're suffering a little bit from not playing the South African teams, because we're able to bully the Australian teams up front. You don't bully South African pack, so you have to find another way to beat their defence, beat their aggression, beat their combativeness. And not having regular games against them in Super Rugby, I think, has put us slightly behind physically where we have been in the past, particularly, the successful sort of 2011 to 2015 World Cup victories where we were a very good physical side, and that was due to playing South Africa regularly. So, look, I really struggle to answer this question. Could we actually do with bringing Aaron Smith back because we don't have the depth at 9 and we feel underdeveloped if he's played over 100 tests? Well, it doesn't feel to me fair the way that you govern that. A 10-test All Black like Lester Whainganuku can't be allowed to come back, but he could be massively pivotal for the All Blacks in the next five years or so. But yet, because of the criteria, he's being basically traded by the fact that he hasn't played enough tests. So it's complicated, mate. I think I'm probably going to have to for once. And you know me, I'm usually pretty good at answering your questions.
You're on the fence. You got to sit there.
Do the old give it the Basil brush, mate. I don't know if that's the right way to be sort of signing off 2023, but it's only taken you 9 months to stump me.
Yeah. Well, look, let's wrap it up then. Compare France to the other World Cups that you've been. I'll tell you what, just a few impressions that I had. I had a fabulous time, mate. We arrived a week before the quarterfinal, and building up to that was the best rugby match I've ever been physically present at. So exciting. And when you're watching your own team play and play with such courage, conviction, and also upset the odds as that following night, France versus South Africa, and when that stadium started, they all started bouncing and jumping. I'd never experienced that at a rugby game. Then you get into the semi-final, and our one was a bit of a cakewalk, but that South Africa game in the semi-final for them against England was just, again, gripping rugby, despite the fact it may have been, kind of not the most flowing game, but by God, it was intense. And then you get to the final and the atmosphere there, and, there's something about it being in Europe. I'd love it to go to a World Cup in South Africa, Justin, because I've never been to that country, and I should imagine that would be an amazing place to watch it as well. But just in terms of the World Cups, I actually think, good on World Rugby, the tournament is getting better and bigger. I'm not convinced that adding another 4 teams is the answer at all, and I think the 20 teams is probably the best model. But look, overall, as a tournament, and how lucky were we to be in France watching that, mate? Brilliant.
Absolutely, yeah, and I totally agree with you. I don't feel that the extra 4 teams is going to be of any benefit to that Rugby World Cup, and I don't feel it's fair. We don't want the blowouts that we saw, in some of the games. 60, 70, 80, 90 points is not healthy for anybody. So I feel that the criteria is pretty tough and strict now, and I'd even probably drop a couple of teams if that was at all possible. So just to keep the quality high and to keep the interest in all of the games and all the pool matches high. But in terms of a spectacle and as host of the French, I thought they did an outstanding job. And, France is a very easy country to get around, but their stadia is magnificent. There wasn't a bad stadium. There wasn't a stadium that wasn't full. And that is a real credit to ticket sales and the French loving their rugby. Even for, I think it was Portugal versus Tonga or whoever it was. One of those, the games that you could maybe only 3/4 sell the stadium, it was full. So, incredible circumstances. And I think they did a brilliant job. And let's not forget, in September and up until the end of the quarterfinals, the weather was literally in the 30s. And so we had to have water stops. And equally, we had fast-flowing, entertaining rugby and not a lot of TMO interference. It all started from semi-finals onwards, where for all 4 games, both semi-finals and the final, so 3 games, where's my math going? It rained, and it rained significantly. And that changes the way the game's played, and it changes the player's skill, and it changes the contact areas because, players have to grip the ball a bit more. So, the weather did play a part in the finish in Paris, where it was wet for all those 3 last games, and that changed the game, and it meant, I think it meant more TMO interference because there wasn't really any up until the end of the quarterfinals. And look at the quarterfinals we had in dry conditions, like you said. 2 incredible games of rugby in Paris, magnificent.